Nicolae Ceausescu. Nicolae Ceausescu, who came to power in Romania in 1965, quickly created one of the most totalitarian regimes in Eastern Europe. Inspired by Stalinism and Asian dictatorships, he built a cult of personality. His portraits filled the cities, and his speeches were broadcast in schools and factories. He declared himself the genius of the Carpathians, pursued a policy of national isolation and harsh austerity, while the people suffered. His absurd project, the massive Palace of Parliament, consumed the country's resources. His wife Elena, an unqualified scholar, became the second ruler. In 1989, after a popular uprising, Ceausescu attempted to flee, but was caught and executed along with his wife. Their end became a symbol of the fall of Eastern European communism, Antonio de Salazar. Antonio de Salazar, an economics professor who became a dictator, ruled Portugal from 1932 to 1968. He created the New State regime, based on Catholic values, censorship, and total control. He rejected fascist external appearances, but built a harsh authoritarian state internally. His favorite word was order, and he hated mass democracy, believing the people incapable of governing. Salazar despised corruption, lived modestly, but kept the country in poverty, suppressing trade unions and persecuting dissenters. He stubbornly clung to African colonies, even as the rest of the world was losing them. His regime fell only in 1974, when the military grew tired of endless colonial wars. Kim Il-sung. Kim Il-sung, the eternal president of North Korea, founded a unique dictatorship dynasty. He began his career as a partisan against the Japanese, later becoming a favorite of Soviet generals, and was placed at the head of North Korea in 1948. He transformed the country into a closed, militarized fortress where everyone had to adhere to Juche, the ideology of self-reliance. His cult of personality reached absurd levels. Children were taught his biography from a young age, and cities were named after him. He started the Korean War, which took millions of lives. Under his rule, the country severed ties with the outside world and lived in fear of enemies and internal traitors. After his death in 1994, he was declared the eternal president. His cult lives on to this day. Enver Hoxa. Enver Hoxa ruled Albania from 1944 to 1985 and turned it into the most isolated country in Europe. Inspired by Stalinism, he broke with the Soviet Union after the de-Stalinization and later severed ties with China, remaining completely alone. The country lived under the motto, "No compromises," and dissent was met with brutal punishment. Every household had to build concrete bunkers, fearing an invasion. He banned religion, closing churches and mosques, and portraits of Hoxha became mandatory in every classroom and office. The economy collapsed, but the cult grew stronger. Even after his death in the 1990s, the country realized just how deep the paranoia and poverty ran under his rule. Idi Amin. Idi Amin, the military dictator of Uganda, came to power in 1971 through a military coup. Initially seen as a charismatic leader, he quickly turned into a brutal tyrant, sowing fear and chaos. He expelled the Asian population, destroying the economy, and carried out mass repression, with an estimated 500,000 deaths under his rule. Amin claimed to converse with God, called himself the King of Scotland, and wore self-made medals. He had a penchant for cannibalism, keeping the heads of enemies in his refrigerator as reminders of duty. His rule combined madness, violence, and theatrical eccentricity. In 1979, he was overthrown, fleeing to Saudi Arabia, where he lived until his death, never brought to trial. Jean-Bedel Bokassa. Jean-Bedel Bokassa, a former French army sergeant, became the president of the Central African Republic and later proclaimed himself emperor. In 1977, he held a lavish coronation inspired by Napoleon, spending a third of the country's budget. His despotism quickly took on bloody aspects: repression, torture, and even accusations of cannibalism. He turned his residence into a luxurious palace and the streets of the capital into empty showcases of propaganda. His cult of personality was combined with absolute cruelty. He ordered the massacre of hundreds of school children as punishment for their protest. France, tired of the shame, organized a coup. Bokassa fled, later returned, was arrested, sentenced, but then pardoned. Despite everything, he always claimed, "The people loved me. I was their emperor." Francois Duvalier. Francois Duvalier, a doctor epidemiologist, transformed himself into a voodoo god. He ruled Haiti from 1957 to 1971, using the army and his personal guard, the Tonton Macoutes, to terrorize the population. He proclaimed himself president for life, renamed streets in his honor, and convinced the people that his enemies would be cursed after death. Papa Doc's face hung in every home, and his voice was broadcast on the streets through loudspeakers. He expelled Catholic priests and replaced them with loyal shamans. His regime was characterized by dark mysticism, torture, repression, and total isolation. After his death, his son, Jean-Claude, inherited the power. The people spent decades recovering from his voodoo dictatorship. Robert Mugabe. Robert Mugabe started as a national hero fighting against the white minority in Rhodesia. In 1980, he became the first prime minister of independent Zimbabwe, but quickly descended into authoritarianism. He conducted punitive operations against the opposition, resulting in tens of thousands of deaths in Matabeleland. Under his rule, he confiscated land from white farmers, devastating agriculture. Inflation reached billions of percent, and money lost value faster than it could be printed. Mugabe enacted increasingly absurd policies, but retained power until 2017, when the military finally forced him to step down. Despite everything, he still considered himself the savior of the nation. Slobodan Milosevich. Slobodan Milosevich was the Serbian leader whose policies of nationalism and the division of Yugoslavia led to the bloodiest conflicts in Europe after World War II. He came to power in the late 1980s, promising Serbian greatness. Under his leadership, wars broke out in Croatia, Bosnia, and Kosovo. He was accused of ethnic cleansing, genocide, mass deportations, and killings. Milosevic skillfully manipulated the media, turning television into a propaganda tool. He became a symbol of aggression but remained popular among part of the population. In 2000, he was overthrown by protests. Later, he was brought to The Hague for trial but died before a verdict was reached. Milosevic became a tragic figure, a liberator who became a dictator. Saparmurat Niyazov. Saparmurat Niyazov, who took power in Turkmenistan after the collapse of the USSR, quickly turned himself into Turkmenbashi, the father of all Turkmen. He built a personality cult, rewrote school textbooks, naming himself the central hero, and published Ruhnama, a pseudo-sacred book of his own writing, mandatory for study. He renamed the months of the year in honor of his family members, established a golden statue of himself that rotated to face the sun, and banned opera, ballet, and even golden teeth. His eccentricity was matched by an iron fist. Opposition was destroyed, the media controlled, and the economy fully centralized. Even after his death in 2006, his cult lingered. Subscribe right now. More videos are coming soon.